Hey everyone, welcome to the Golden Hours, and this is the second to last episode. The plan for next week and the final episode of the Golden Hours is I want to know what you guys want to hear. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the film industry or a particular area of the film industry. I'm going to take that question and go to people in the film industry that'll know that particular subject more than me. And I'm going to come back to you next week with a response. It's been a good run. I've really enjoyed this podcast series, but I'm starting to get to a point where I need to lighten up my schedule a bit and focus more on writing and some of the projects I've got going on. And that's actually what I want to talk about today is what I am writing. I've been writing a film script for about a month now. I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about what that process has been like, what the story is, and what my plans are for that script, including the first few pages of the script in the Patreon segment. If you want exclusive access to certain content, concept art, behind the scenes material from Kestis, and just all sorts of really cool stuff. And there's a 7-day free trial, so there really isn't any reason why you can't just jump on there anyway. You're getting the tip of the iceberg here on YouTube and on Spotify. Yeah, I'm working on a script. Easter is like the Super Bowl of church services. Producing tons of video content. That's what I do for a living. I produce video content for the church I work at. And it was just a busy couple of weeks. And so once we finally got through Easter, we had it was 4 days off. Within those 4 days, I wrote an entire script. It just snuck up on me out of nowhere. And then I went back to work. But it was really life-giving. I had a really good time. And I discovered these really interesting characters. And I think the place where I was coming from as I was writing this script was, I need to write a script that I know that I can shoot. And I can shoot for dirt cheap. But I can shoot well and make it look like a Hollywood film and do it on a budget. Because what I've come to learn about making films in the 2020s is it's nearly impossible. If you want to hear more on that conversation, go to last week's episode of the podcast, and me and my buddy Andrew White, we really dive into the problem with modern day cinema. And ultimately, at the end of the day, films are not as financially viable as they used to be. Studios aren't taking risks, and it's becoming more and more difficult to get distribution for your films. It's become much more of a gamble to tell an original story today than it was in, say, the 90s or even early 2000s. But then again, it was most of the things that were coming out in the 90s and 2000s were based off of some sort of book. You know, you really had an overwhelming amount of original content coming out. Even the stuff that was based on books, like Taxi Driver, like those things, Falling Down, those things were based off of books. Jack Ryan, like Hunt for Red October, those things were based off of books. But the technical direction and the choices they were making were so much edgier than they were today. And since then, it's just become so much more harder to get a film off the ground. And especially for smaller people like us, it's almost an impossibility. It's almost like a pipe dream to get a movie into theaters. But me and Andrew talked about it, and I firmly believe that within the next decade, we will see a completely different film industry, a whole new way of making money off of films. Because that's the whole thing, right? Is how can you break even on the money that you spent to make your film? And for people who are on the smaller, super low budget side of things, we essentially have three challenges. A, we have to write an objectively perfect script. An objectively perfect, like the studios won't settle for anything less. They have to have they have to have a way of filtering out the good and the bad. And the standard for stories is just perfection. So they won't settle for anything short of an objectively good script and an objectively well-written story. Two, or I guess B, you have to be able to produce this film so that it looks like a Hollywood level film. You know, like there can't be any corners cut. There can't be any, lowered standards. Like, production value has to be high. Even if you have a low budget, you have to find a way to make it look like something high budget, because that's just the standard. They won't put anything on Netflix. They won't put anything on Amazon or in theaters if it looks like it was shot on a DSLR. They just won't even consider it. Netflix literally has, and actually every studio has this, but Netflix is very open about it. They have a list of equipment criteria. And if your film is not shot using cameras on their list of criteria, they won't even give it the time of day. I think the Sony FX3 just recently got added to that list, and we can thank Gareth Edwards for that. But like there is a production value standard that studios and streaming services, they won't even consider your film unless you're shooting that way. And so A, you have to write a perfect script. B, you have to have Hollywood level production value. And C, because of where you are as a low budget indie filmmaker, you have to find a way to do it as cheap as humanly possible. And so that's sort of been the struggle that I've been having lately. I sort of peaked on YouTube with Kestis. I made a 40-minute Star Wars film with costumes, sets, visual effects, multiple plots, an ensemble cast, an original score. I mean, the list goes on. That was a fan film with bigger production value than I confidently say 95% of the Star Wars fan films that are out there. And I did it for $13,000. And so there was a part of me that was like, okay, I'm not going to repeat Kestis. I'm just not. There's not going to be any sort of film that I make that is of that same caliber with zero return. I didn't make any money off of Kestis. And I knew that going in. That wasn't really the point of making Kestis. And like, I put in some effort to try to, get some attention out of it. Like, I submitted to film festivals, and I did go out of my way to do certain things to try to gain some track, but they didn't really amount to anything, and that's a whole other conversation. Let's just say Disney got involved. But I'm never going to do something like Kestis again. If I do something to that scale or higher, the goal would be to profit somehow, or at the very least break even. I need to write a script that is just so bare bones cheap and is just completely motivated by the characters and the story and the situation they're in, that all I really need to consider is the equipment, the toys that I have on set. All right, this is what everybody in Hollywood is using. This is the kind of lens everybody in Hollywood is using to shoot their films on. This is the look that is being accepted by Netflix. Okay, I have to assume that this is the production value standard. At that point, it's like, all right, I have the arsenal. I have the list of film equipment that is going to get me their production value, like look-wise. At this point now, I need to craft a story that doesn't depend on visual effects, that doesn't depend on an ensemble cast, that doesn't depend on set pieces. I really just need a story about a couple of characters that go through things. I spent a long time, I would say I spent the last few months racking my brain about something within that category. And I thought I had a story. At the time, I thought I had a story. And for the eagle-eyed people that have been following me on Instagram, you could probably figure out what that project was going to be. And it just didn't come to fruition. After like 20 drafts of this story that I was playing around with, I just finally came to grips one day and was like, this story cannot be done without it being expensive. I just finally got the story to a place where I felt good about it, and I put it on the shelf, and that's where it still is today. Who knows if I'll ever get back to it, because I just know right now, the Zach Golden right now making films, on May 30th, 2025, he's not ready for that film yet. That's for another day. And so part of me was just a little disappointed in myself, and just being like, man, like I've never had a problem with big ideas. I love epics. I love me a good 4-hour film, like Seven Samurai, Lawrence of Arabia with your 3.5-hour movie, I love big, grand ideas, and they come to me very, very, very easily. But I was having trouble thinking of something simple and grounded. And it was making me kind of upset, because it was like, man, like, I feel like I should be able to do this. And instead of racking my brain, I just focused on the book that I've been writing, The Lodestar Manifest. And if you're curious about that book, it's essentially what if Moses and the Israelites came from another planet. And you can see exclusive artwork and even read some early drafts, get some beta reading opportunities, and learn more about the world of the Lodestar Manifest. You can discover all that on Patreon. But I just kind of put a pin in script writing and the whole movie world, and just focused on writing my book. And then come Easter, pulled out the laptop, just started typing away. I didn't even like do what I normally did, which was, get my notepad out, write down characters and the nutshell technique, and figure out what I want to say philosophically, blah, blah, blah. I didn't do any of that. I just pulled out Rider Duet and just started typing and just went for it. And just sort of like crafting it in my head as I'm typing. Like I'm structuring the film and like the nutshell technique and the characters as I'm typing it out. First day, I wrote the whole thing. Day 2, that's when I did all the structuring, the nutshell technique, the characters, how I wanted them, what I wanted the characters to represent in the story, the philosophical, I figured out everything I wanted to say on day 2. And then on day 3, I wrote it again and like moved things around, rewrote certain aspects, changed things around. And by the end of day 3, I had a pretty solid first draft. And I sort of call that my first draft, because the draft that I wrote on day 1 is more like a bowl of spaghetti that I dumped on the floor. And by day 3, I had reached down and grabbed that handful of spaghetti and put it back in the bowl. And then what was in the bowl was draft 1. You know what I'm saying? That analogy was kind of gross, but that was sort of the process that I took, which is not the process that I normally take when I sit down to write. But for whatever reason, it was just like something took over me, and I just started typing away, and it just came out of me. And the more I've worked on this script, I'm currently on draft 2, and the more I work on this script, the more I just love these characters that I've discovered. They're so real, and they're so fascinating. And I hate and love both of them so much. And yeah, it's just been such a thrill to write. And I can't help, as I've been writing, I can't help but think of how easy it would be to shoot this thing. And I'm thinking financially, like strategically, I'm thinking financially how I could make my money back if I were to make this film. So, and that's sort of the caveat, right? That's sort of the big question is, how am I going to make this film? And I've done enough math. I've looked into what my script is demanding. I've looked into the resources that I have personally, and I feel, and I did shopping around. I reached out to people, made some phone calls, and just sort of like, there's more of a hypothetical. Like, if I were to make this film, if I were to take the script that I'm currently writing, and I were to shoot this thing, what's the price tag that I'm looking at here? By the time I added up all the math, I came to about 55 grand. Part of me is like, well, what's stopping me from crowdfunding? What's stopping me from taking a loan out of the bank and just make it a gamble on myself? And so I'm kind of looking into crowdfunding. I hear a lot of good and a lot of bad in terms of crowdfunding. I might give that a shot, but the other part of me is just like just go to the freaking bank and make a gamble on yourself. And that way it's your money. You can do you can do whatever you want with it. And, whether the movie is successful or not, you just pay it back. Like, at the end of the day, I want to be able to know that I at least tried. And the only thing to that is, like, why spend all that money when you can spend other people's money? That's something I've heard a lot from the filmmakers who are in the industry right now. Like, I've got friends of mine who are associated with people with Angel Studios, and they're talking back and forth with people at Lionsgate, and they hear the language of those people and how they talk and the things that they look for. And that's the thing, is like, they all say the same thing. It's never spend your own money when you're making a film. And the question is, how do you accomplish that skill? How do you ask people for money? If you can learn to sell your story and learn to ask for funding, then you can do anything. And so there is a part of me that's just like, man, this is an opportunity for me to learn something, for me to learn how to ask for money and learn how to crowdfund, I guess. And that's a skill I would like to learn. But the other part of me is just like, man, I just want to make movies. So I'm kind of conflicted by these two sides of me. I think there's a lot of reward in doing the hard thing, so that could be the route that I end up going. But I mean, that's like, future, a bridge to be crossed, because I'm still knee deep in draft number 2, which I mean, it's already miles better than the first draft. The first draft, I felt really happy about it. I was like, man, like, this, for a first draft, this is a really fun read. But draft 2, I'm having a genuine blast. Like, I'm audibly laughing as I'm writing these certain situations, and I'm like getting upset at my own characters when I discover the things that they do to each other. And all the feelings that I was feeling when I was writing draft 1 just got multiplied by 10 in the process of writing draft 2. So I can't even imagine where draft 4 or 5 is going to be. I have a feeling that I'm going to get to my final draft quicker than I have in past projects, because I've just felt so in it with this story. And so I want to talk about it. I want to get to this story and actually talk about what it's about. And so essentially the story is 2 friends are planning on stabbing each other in the back on the same day. Neither of them are aware of the other person's intentions, but both of them have guns. And I'm going to talk about the title, I'm going to talk about the characters, and I'm actually going to read the first 5 pages of the script here on this episode of the podcast. But first, we're going to cut, because it's Patreon members from here on out. And for everyone who is on Patreon, thank you so much for your love and support. And for everybody who's not on Patreon, come check us out. We got all kinds of cool stuff. I've already talked about it, I think, like 2 or 3 different times on this episode. So go do it. Lots of cool content. You're missing out. And cut.